This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into episode 149 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, February 12th on a Sunday. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, for another week in the den. We've got a lot to cover as far as St. Cloud hockey and hockey around the state of Minnesota, around the Midwest here. Of course, the men's team was off this weekend, so we'll recap the rest of NCAA men's hockey. An Alaska team that seemed to be rolling, for example, really good until last night against Long Island. They'll have them again this week. So some intriguing storylines along the pairwise. Of course, we'll touch on the women's team who had, all things considered, a decent weekend against Minnesota Duluth. Maybe a little bit left to be desired, but overall a pretty good result that we're going to take a look at. The Minnesota Wild. Not the greatest week here. Of course, 7-game homestand for them. We'll take a look at that. They're right in the middle of that. And then we'll head on to the extra ice session for the little brother to the Minnesota Wild, the Iowa Wild, and take a deep dive and look at them and what they're up to as well. Just a reminder for those tuning in as well, next week we will have a little bit of a later release, probably Tuesday morning. So just keep an eye on that as we move through the week. But other than that, we will start with the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup and Center Ice View News and Notes.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center Ice View News and Notes, Noah, and not too much on the docket this week. So let's jump right into it. One of the bigger things that's been happening around the NHL, and more specifically the NHLPA, the Players Association, is that it looks like they have found their guy to be their next executive director. And it looks like at least it's rumored to be Marty Walsh, who is the current U.S. Secretary of Labor. Now, mind you, this is not an official announcement, but a lot of sources out there pointing that this guy is indeed going to be the successor to Donald Fair, who will be departing the position at 12 years. So just, I guess, barring a official announcement, Marty Walsh set to be the next leader of the NHLPA. Pretty important, too, because let's just say that CBA talks are coming up. And NHL has never had issues with that. So it's almost, shall we say, we've been waiting for the ball to drop, right, Noah? It is just about 2 weeks before the trade deadline here coming up early March. And we have our first big one. And it is the New York Rangers acquiring from the St. Louis Blues Vladimir Tarasenko. Here's what both teams get. So the Rangers do get Vladimir Tarasenko. They also get defenseman Nico Mikkola, which I think is a nice little sweetener. Yeah. The St. Louis Blues get forward Sammy Blais. Now, if I remember correctly, I think Sammy Blais was the former St. Louis Blues.
Former St. Louis Blue, part of that Pavel Buchnevich trade.
Yes. They also get prospect Hunter Skinner. They get a conditional 2023 first-round pick, especially in this one. That's a deep draft, so this could be good for the St. Louis Blues, a conditional fourth in 2024. But the most important thing here, Noah, is St. Louis is retaining 50% of Tarasenko's contract to make the money work. So first big fish to drop. This one It sounds like the Rangers have been kicking the tires in Tarasenko for quite some time. It's apparently from CBC and from Elliot Friedman. Apparently, they've been looking at this for over a year to acquire Tarasenko. He's also expressed interest in playing with Artemi Panarin, so we're able to finally get a deal done, and really good for the Rangers, for the Blues. This could signal a teardown. When I know Tarasenko wanted out, but now the spotlight for St. Louis is what do you do with Ryan O'Reilly?
Yeah, certainly. And Tarasenko, Artemi Panarin, they connected about 4 minutes into their first hockey game together for a goal. So, the Rangers back-to-back wins for them as well since he's gotten there too. Mikkola, like you mentioned, a nice secondary addition here. Sammy Blais, good player, but, the return, I think, was a little underwhelming if you're a St. Louis fan. The one thing that the Rangers had in surplus, actually, one of the few teams with 2 first-round draft picks. Of course, their other first-rounder coming from Dallas in that Niels Lindqvist trade that happened last year, I think. But that's the thing, is you look at the Rangers and you look at Dallas, regardless of that conditional 2023 first round pick, it's probably not going to be that high of a pick, all things considered. That St. Louis's actual first rounder will likely be a little bit more higher, because Dallas, of course, is going to make the playoffs. And
most likely,
of course, on the other side of things, the Rangers are in a pretty decent spot to likely get a crack at it too. And I don't know which one they traded away. I didn't look that closely, but and we didn't see anything on the conditions, but they were in a unique spot. Of course, one of the most frustrated sources with this was Patrick Kane. Patrick Kane kind of had that the Rangers as a ideal destination, and interestingly enough, I believe with salary retention and other things with prospect pools, I believe the Rangers could still fit him into his cap, which is actually a little bit scary if you really think about it. Could you imagine Panarin, Kane, and Tarasenko on a line together? Although I don't think any of them play center, but like
on the Rangers side, you're asking, you're for the late gifts, but the one thing that now the Rangers don't have is assets maybe that Chicago wants in return. That's the one thing that may explore Patrick Kane or elsewhere. And still the thing is Patrick Kane has still got full control over this, again, a full no trade clause. Yeah. Supposedly, he has, essentially gotten to his agent and has put together teams that he would be interested in joining for a cup run. And the Rangers were on his list. The question is, has that changed since Tarasenko has now joined the Rangers? And do the Rangers want to give up assets from what they could consider to be a true rental after they have unloaded some again in this trade for Tarasenko? So I don't know. It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah, well, currently projected cap space, of course, is under $1 million for them right now, but they could move some pieces if they felt that it was worth enough of a look, obviously. So, like you mentioned too, I'd imagine some salary retention would be coming out of that if you're on the Chicago side of things to make a deal happen. So interesting. It is weird thinking about Patrick Kane in a different uniform, that's for sure. Other players that are not going anywhere here. Second to last topic, some signings and extensions here. Dylan Cousins, the early 20-year-old Buffalo, 7 years, 7.1 average annual value, 43 points in 49 games played. This contract basically mimics the Tage Thompson contract from last year. So both the top line centers locked up in Buffalo for just over $14 million out there. So they got shelled last night, though. So interested to see how they kind of rebound from that. They've had a interesting season, but it's an exciting time to be a Buffalo Sabres fan. I think we can definitively say that we're at that point now. I know Jack Eichel obviously was, an exciting player there, and they were kind of up and down, but I think really we're starting to maybe see that turn just a little bit in Buffalo, and I feel like they're steadily going in the right direction now. So Dylan Cousins locked up in Buffalo. Bo Horvat, of course, this trade happened about 2 hours after our show last week, headed to the Islanders, and then he got his extension, 8 years, $8.5 million, 54 points in 49 contests, of course, 27 years of age for him. So the Isles now, I would say, as long as Horvat is healthy and continues to produce at a rate we expect him to relative to that contract, it looks like a good deal for the Islanders as far as that trade is concerned. Connor Timmins to the Leafs, of course, a trade earlier this season, 2 years, $1.1 million average annual value, has kind of flourished in Toronto, 12 points in 20 games at age 24 on the back end. Jordan Harris for the Canadians, 2 years, $1.4 million, 11 points in 47 games. He's only 22, a good little defenseman on the back end there as well. And in net for the Los Angeles Kings, Phoenix Copley, a 1 year, $1.5 million average annual value. The journeyman at 31 years old has paced the Kings with an 8.97 and a 2.92 for a 15-3-1 record for the Los Angeles Kings, which I didn't know he was doing that good. I mean, it's, Cal Peterson obviously has struggled, and Jonathan Quick has not been great, but
isn't he out with injury too? Or no, he got sent down. That's right.
He got sent down to the AHL, but yeah, I guess I'm not surprised, but also slightly surprised it's only a 1 year deal. I mean, it kind of feels like, at age 31, I mean, I know that his body of work, he's only played in 51 NHL games prior to, this season, but I mean, that's a pretty decent winning percentage, all things considered. Maybe I thought he could have earned an extra year, but I mean, with that being said,
I think with the Kings, they're in a precarious situation. And then what I mean by that is, they go out and they get Kevin Fiala, right? They go and get that score that they desperately wanted, right? Here's the thing with them, though. Jonathan Quick, he's done after this year.
Yep.
5.8 million. So you kind of wonder if it's allowing Los Angeles to explore free agency or maybe the trade market for another goaltender. I really think they thought Cal Peterson was going to be the guy. And then, of course, this season he had to struggle. So you kind of wonder, what that might look like as far as the offseason is concerned. You kind of wonder.
Well, you do realize that the starter is now David Rennick, right? It has to be.
Oh, of course, right? David Rennick and the Greenville Swamp Rabbits, I believe, is the ECHL affiliate to the organizations. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it, Noah, is that I think they understand with Fiala and with some of the younger core starting to kind of be on the up and up. I think they feel the goaltending position is the next thing they want to shore up. And I think what it sends is Copley is a good addition. Now, maybe they think they can go out and get someone better. But who knows? We'll see. Remember the Wild, they got a guy named Philip Gustafsson that people didn't think was going to be that good. And right now he's out playing Marc-Andre Fleury. So,
it's interesting that you look at some of these teams that have had great goaltenders retire. I think another example might have been New Jersey in the way that they struggled in that position for a while until recent. Not that it's shored up immensely, but they're a much better team right now. The New York Rangers obviously struck gold with Shesterkin as well. But it's interesting. You go back 5 or 6 years ago and you said, oh, the LA Kings are looking at goaltending. That's a weird phrase to think about with Jonathan Quick being that mainstay for a long time. But, guy that, has had a great career to this point, has been a little bit injury prone a little bit as well, though, too. So obviously hampered some things related to the Kings there as well. Speaking of injuries, our last topic here, kind of an interesting one for the first one. Calgary Flames defenseman Rasmus Andersson, day to day after being struck by a vehicle Wednesday in Detroit. He was riding a scooter to dinner when he was hit by a vehicle. So he was taken to the hospital. Some tests were done on him, and it seems like he's in good spirits and good health relatively back at home. But kind of an interesting, when Wednesday in Detroit, they were on the road, obviously, and he was on a scooter. I don't know if it was a motorized scooter or like one of those, just the mobile scooters where you're going down the sidewalk or whatever, but nonetheless, he is day to day on the back end for the Flames. Staying in Canada here, Ottawa, Anton Forsberg, the netminder, out with a lower body injury indefinitely. Golden Knights goaltender Logan Thompson, week to week with a lower body injury as well. Of course, the first year All-Star this season. New Jersey's Jack Hughes, also an All-Star, out week to week with an upper body injury out there for the Devils. And Cale Makar is out for a week with a head injury. And welcome into the main portion of the show. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, episode 149 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast, college hockey news and the like, ready to get recapped here. And first of all, since we have some time, and we don't always have some time, Nick, how have things been the past couple of weeks? How have you been doing? Anything exciting, or just kind of keeping up with the hockey season as we continue to push into playoff time here?
Oh, geez. Looking for my sanity probably is the best way to describe it. Yeah. So obviously a couple weeks ago, Hockey Day was a nice opportunity. And then just a couple days ago, still traveling with the Null. So it was North Iowa down in Austin, and they lost that game, but then they rebounded yesterday at home. And then yesterday, actually got to call a Section 1AA girls hockey semifinal between Lakeville South and Northfield. And holy cow, what a game that was. And actually had an analyst on my call. Brent Bielenberg, for those who don't know, was actually the head coach at Northfield for about 20 years. Super insightful. Actually was a really freaking good call. Arena was packed, and got to see one of the new Gopher commits, Ayla Puppy, down there for Northfield, and oh my goodness, is she good. Just incredible skater, the hockey IQ. This Northfield team, they made that jump from single A to double A not too long ago, and for the last 3 seasons, they've knocked out Lakeville South in the section playoffs. And so Northfield will play the winner of Lakeville North in Owatonna. That's next Thursday. And then the boys get underway here, I believe, section starting up next week too. So things are ramping up, as you and I both know. The February hits, the regular seasons come to an end, sections, and then state tournaments for college, NCHC, and we're going to talk WCHA. It's going to get busy here around. But how about yourself?
Yeah, it is going to get busy. Like you mentioned, last week of the regular season in the WCHA, maybe we'll have to take a look at Minnesota high school as we get closer to that as well, too. I hear that tournament's kind of big. As far as North Dakota
styles, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's the most important part, I think.
Exactly.
I did get asked to do the girls' state tournament here in North Dakota, but unfortunately, I'm not able to because of clinical. So I was, looking forward to do that. It was kind of funny. We had a nursing conference last week, and of course, they had the TV, cameraman that was, getting the package ready for the story. And I just happened to be walking by, next to the booth where he was standing, and there was one gal that he had asked to interview, and I walked by, and she goes, do you want to do this, interview instead? And I'm like, I mean, I can, I didn't really think about it either way. And she goes, you should do it. And I'm like, okay, fine. And of course the guy, he starts getting,
it was hard to convince you.
Yeah. Well, he starts getting the lapel mic out, right, and stuff. And he hands it to me, and he starts trying to walk me through it. And I just, I grab it and clip it on, and, clip it where it's supposed to go. And he goes, okay. And then he goes, can you, state your name and spell it for us and stuff. And I do it. And, I open up the first thing, and he goes, have you been on TV before? And I'm like, yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. Just a wee bit. And so of course we did the interview, and he goes, where do I know you from? And I'm like, yeah, I work for the Taros. And he goes, oh, that's what it is. I'm like, yeah, I sit in front of a mic sometimes. But I think the biggest news coming out of my neck of the woods right now is I officially signed my contract in the hospital last week. So I officially signed a 3-year contract. Yeah. So obviously really excited about that, and just closed on a new apartment last week as well, too. It's going to be much of an upgrade from the crap box that I currently live in, for sure.
So entry-level contract, is there performance-based incentives? Is there a no trade clause, or what?
I mean, there is. If you, I guess I can put it out there.
Clause, yeah.
I mean, if you want to be theoretical, signing bonuses of up to really there are sign-on bonuses of up to $28,000, and loan retention bonuses of up to $32,000 over the course of 3 to 5 years. So, there is something, which is certainly looking forward to. It's interesting because the way hospitals work, and I don't know if this is true across the country, but at least here it is, you sign your contract, so your actual agreement that has, your bonuses and that sort of thing, but then you actually apply to the department that you want to work. So my contract is a bedside contract for a full-time employee, so I have to hit at least 76 hours of pay period, and then I have to be working bedside or equivalent, I can't just sign a contract like that and then go work in the IT department, right? I have to be doing, direct patient care for the most part. And then you do your application for the actual department you want to apply for, and they set your actual position, your hours, and your actual hourly wage relative to, your night differential and stuff like that. So you actually sign 2 things. So I'm actually an employee of the hospital right now, but I don't actually work in a specific department yet, because that's the second part of this that I did get an interview for. So hopefully that's going to go well. That's going to be in a couple weeks. So obviously a very exciting time as we move through. And in the middle of all of it, college hockey continues to keep rolling here, Nick. Interesting games coming out of a couple of these conferences here. Let's start with the Big Ten. I have a wild guess as to which game might have been the most intriguing coming out of last night. Although this Michigan State series, of course, Michigan winning them both 4-2 and then 4-3 in overtime last night, scoring with less than a second yesterday to take the victory against the Spartans. That was one heck of a hockey game, that Michigan game. Ohio State, Notre Dame, pair of victories, 2-1 and 3-2 in a shootout. Penn State was off this weekend. But you know who wasn't off on Saturday night? The Wisconsin Badgers, losing on Friday to the Gophers, winning 3-1 on Saturday.
Oh boy.
You know what's interesting? I was having a conversation with my parents about this because, of course, you remember the Huskies. The women's team played at the Kohl Center last week in front of a crowd of about 14,400. The men's game only got a little over 8,000, so that's kind of interesting. The women's game got almost twice as much attendance as the men's game did, but Wisconsin saved their best for last weekend. This is really the first blemish all season that I think Minnesota has really had. This Badgers team has given people enough of fits to make them not feel great. Or as Max Veach would allude to, they beat only all the best teams in college hockey. Don't know if that's true or not, but with that being said, what do you think about the Gopher series ending up in a split this weekend?
You know, it'll be funny to see if the Gophers fan base panics as much as St. Cloud's. And I like,
is that even possible?
I didn't think it was. I guess we'll see.
They're still number one in the pairwise, by the way. So
and that's the thing is you're so far down in the season and Wisconsin has sort of gotten a little bit higher in the pairwise. Again, they've had some decent comparisons, shall we say, as the season's gone along. So if anything, it's more of how does the team look at that second game, right? Because again, in the NCAA regionals, it's Friday, Saturday, right? You're playing two in a row. Granted, it's different opponents, but if for the Gophers, you kind of wonder what that might look like against what should be an inferior opponent. I don't think it's anything to really be that upset about. Now, you can look at the overall picture and say, oh my gosh, we lost to Wisconsin. But Keep in mind, like we said, Noah, Wisconsin has had, shall we say, flashes of brilliance this year. They've been few and far in between, but they're still a Division I hockey team. They still can disrupt things. They still can do things well, and they proved it last night. So if any of the Gophers, they just have to have short-term memory, right? You just have to know that, okay, it's sort of a blemish. I'm not even sure if we can call it a full blemish, right? And then just get prepared for the next couple of weekends, because I believe they have Penn State next if you're the Gophers, looking at the Big Ten schedule from the doldrums of my cranium, which is never a good place to look and confirm information. But yeah, no, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I mean, honestly, and if anything, might get a little extra jump, a little extra fuel for the run coming through. Now, if you lost them both, maybe that's a different story, but you split. I'm not sure if it's that big a deal.
Penn State on the road for the Gophers next weekend. They finish the regular season the week after at home against Ohio State. Yep. So an 8:00 Central Time on that Friday against Ohio State at home, and then 4:30 on that Saturday. Kind of some weird times there as far as that is concerned. I wonder if that's coinciding with anything related to other athletics for Ohio State and Minnesota, respectively. We'll have to take a look. Other than that, though, like you mentioned, Penn State will be well rested for this matchup here. As they were off this week. Of course, they have Minnesota next week. CCHA 2.0, Northern Michigan and St. Thomas, a split. Northern Michigan 3-2, Tommy's 4-2 on the next night. Bowling Green, Michigan Tech, a split between two of the higher up dogs, so to speak. One of them an actual dog, I guess. Michigan Tech winning in night number 2, Bowling Green night number 1, 5-2 and 4-2 were the respective scores. And Bemidji State and Ferris, a split in this one as well. Ferris State 3-2 and Bemidji a 6-2. Move here. 3 splits in the CCHA here. It's interesting. You can take a look at the standings here. Things are tightening up. It's actually Michigan Tech that is currently leading right now, 47 points for them. Mankato at 45, but of course Mankato has 2 games in hand, and then Bowling Green right behind at 41 with the number of games par with Michigan Tech. So really Bowling Green kind of has an outside chance. It would have to be a perfect storm that I don't think is going to happen. So I think it's between Mankato and Michigan Tech for that top spot in the CCHA. I'm going to imagine they've probably got 2 weekends left respectively for each of these teams. So it's probably going to come down to those two. So I don't really know about that conference tournament, though. I mean, I could see a 5 or a 6 seed winning that conference tournament if all things go right. I mean, is this one of those that you feel like, besides maybe Michigan Tech and Mankato, that you feel like a third team could come out of the CCHA as far as the pairwise is concerned?
You mean one?
Yeah.
There's no question that the CCHA tournament right now is kind of wide open, right?
Yeah.
Minnesota State, Northern Michigan, which, I mean, really Minnesota State has been, at least the second half, has been the more consistent team. They certainly haven't been perfect, but they've been the better team. Bowling Green has kind of fallen down. Northern Michigan, holy cow, have they really cooled off? St. Thomas has been sort of another second half team again this season, and again, year number 2. Lake State, they've struggled, but I don't know if there's really anybody that is safe, honestly, just because there hasn't been really a team that has sort of taken a stranglehold on this conference that you look at and say, man, this is going to be a tough team. Like Mankato was last year, right? There was an expectation that Mankato was going to be the team, and I don't know if there is really that safe bet this year. So it's very possible this year.
If you like some intrigue here, like we mentioned, so the 2 teams that have 24 points, Michigan Tech and the other that they just played, Bowling Green, they only have 2 games left. Every other group has 4 games left for their weekend series. So Mankato has Bemidji State next weekend, and then they close out the regular season with none other than Michigan Tech. So the top 2 teams in that division are going to do battle in a couple of weeks. That's going to be an awesome matchup. Mankato right in the mix. On the women's side, they'll be right in the mix for a very intriguing matchup as well, too, by the way. We'll get to that as far as final showdowns for the regular season on the women's side here. But moving over to ECAC action here, of course, keeping our eye on Quinnipiac, essentially. They beat Clarkson and St. Lawrence this weekend. Harvard beating Dartmouth 6-3, although that score does not give you an idea of where we were at. That game was 3-3 for a long time. Harvard had to find a way in that one. Colgate losing to Cornell 3-2. Cornell continues to stay pat in the ECAC. Hockey East here. Merrimack traveling to Maine. This was last Sunday. They lost to Maine on that Sunday in OT 3-2, and then Maine beat BC 3-1 on Friday. Providence traveling to Vermont. I didn't realize both these teams are a little bit lower now in the standings. Vermont is the last place team, but Providence got the victory last Sunday. Northeastern then played Providence on Friday. It was a 4-3 shootout victory for the Huskies. Speaking of other Huskies, UConn dropping both to UNH 4-1 and 3-2 in overtime. This New Hampshire Wildcats team has really caused fits these past couple of weeks in Hockey East. It would be an outside shot, but I think them and Maine both have a chance to really disrupt somebody's journey here when it comes to the Hockey East conference play here. The Beanpot, of course, the 2 weeks had started last Monday. The games from that, BC played Harvard, and Harvard won 4-3 in overtime, and Northeastern beat BU 3-1 on that same day.
Both really good games, by the way. Really,
yeah. What a performance from Devin Levi, by the way, in that second game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looked really good. Of course, the Beanpot concludes tomorrow on Monday the 13th. Atlantic Hockey, Sacred Heart played Air Force. Air Force won the first night, Sacred Heart the second night. Of course, Sacred Heart trying to catch RIT in the standings. And then independent-wise, Stonehill played Lindenwood, and it wasn't even close. Lindenwood was all over them. 10-3 was the score yesterday. So, nice. and then Alaska moved up to 15th in the pairwise on Friday night with a 5-3 victory over Long Island, but then dropped back down to 19, losing 3-1 yesterday. This Fairbanks team, they've got Long Island again this week, so they really are going to have a good push if they want any sort of chance to be able to be in the big dance. If they do, that's where they're going to be. They're going to be at 15 and just narrowly sneak into the tournament. But how cool would it be to see Fairbanks and then Nooks in that tournament?
It would be cool, but they're going to have to be in that 13th spot. You can't be in that 15 or 14 spot. I think that's too close to the razor's edge, if you want to call, because again, Atlantic Hockey is going to have their one team in, and that usually shuffles that last team out. So they can do it. They're going to have to take care of business here down the stretch, especially as an independent, because again, you don't have a conference tournament where you can lock in a secured spot. So they got their work cut out for them, but they're within an arm's reach. So it'd be really fun to see that, especially for a team that honestly we thought was maybe not going to come back. So
one of the things you're thinking of Anchorage. So Fairbanks is the team that subsidizes everybody up there because they actually have a little bit of money. But yeah, I mean, it would have been maybe in jeopardy conference wise. The travel just would have been interesting. Of course, they can now schedule 4 to 8 games against Anchorage up there instead of having to travel for other games extensively. It's about a 3-hour drive, give or take, between those two cities. The thing that is fortunate for Fairbanks here, they've got Long Island at home next weekend. They're at Arizona State the weekend after, and they finish the season against Lindenwood. So they have a chance to pile some victories together. However, against opponents that could likely hurt them rather than help them if they drop any of those games. So we'll keep an eye on Fairbanks, but they have 6 games left. They have something that they can at least work with a little bit. So as far as other scores here and things to look forward to, we take a look at what's on tap this week here. Like we mentioned in the independent world, Long Island now travels to Alaska Fairbanks. Lindenwood will travel to ASU. So it seems like all of these teams are essentially planning on playing each other in kind of a weird little non-conference independent type rotation, so to speak, in the second half of the regular season. The Beanpot also continuing in Hockey East, BU playing BC now, and Northeastern will get Harvard in those matchups. Hockey East, how about this? Besides the single Saturday set with Northeastern playing Vermont and this Sunday with Maine playing UMass Lowell, Hockey East has 4 series that we're covering that are all weekend series, not one game sets. Kind of wild. BU playing Merrimack. Maine will have New Hampshire, which I know is not a high-profile matchup, but I'm curious to see how those two teams play because they have both been red hot as of late. UMass Lowell gets Providence, and UMass gets BC. ECAC-wise here, Quinnipiac watch continues. They play Yale on Friday, and then Brown on Saturday. Clarkson has Cornell on Friday, and then Harvard has Union and RPI, respectively, that weekend. CCHA 2.0, Bowling Green and Michigan Tech both off. Ferris State will travel to Northern Michigan. Mankato travels to Bemidji for that matchup, and St. Thomas travels to Lake Superior. And Notre Dame is the team that's off in the Big Ten as Michigan travels to Ohio State for a Thursday-Saturday matchup. Minnesota gets Penn State on the road, and Michigan State will travel to Wisconsin to see if the Badgers can repeat their magic from this previous weekend. So, Nick, is there anything else you wanted to add about any of those matchups? Anything you're looking forward to? Anything intriguing for you?
The one thing that I'm going to be looking at, as you mentioned, is Quinnipiac and Yale. I want to see how Quinnipiac, I want to see how Harvard does in the ACAC. St. Thomas, if they can actually take a Lake Superior team that is, played a little bit better in the second half, but maybe try to get a sweep at an opportune time to try to get them some momentum heading in. So those would be sort of my ones to watch. But.
Yeah, you mentioned Quinnipiac too. That Brown team they have on Saturday has given some teams fits as well too. The other thing about not the ECAC but Hockey East, you look at the standings: BU 41 points, Northeastern 40, Merrimack 36, UConn 35, UMass Lowell and Providence both at 30, and then Maine, BC, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont at 23, 21, 19, 19, and 15. So that conference is split almost right down the middle, and all the teams in either end of that are a lot closer than you might imagine. So certainly a lot of intrigue for Hockey East as to what they're going to bring to the table as we look forward here. But moving over to NCHC things and taking a look at the pairwise as well. The NCHC, of course, only had 2 matchups this previous week. Colorado College traveling to Omaha. UNO, a 3-2 overtime victory on the first night, and Colorado College, a 3-2 shootout victory in the second night. A pair of games, good showings for both clubs, I think, all things considered here. The Tigers showing their worth against an Omaha team that has surprised us a little bit, and Omaha doing their job against a Tiger team that has surprised everybody else except for the Huskies Warming House podcast. So, pretty good weekend series. And then North Dakota being swept 5-3 and 5-2 by Denver. Probably one of the few times where Huskies fans would have taken a North Dakota victory as well as a sweep here, but it did not happen. Fighting Hawks still stuck in 7th in the NCHC standings. Duluth, Miami, Western, and St. Cloud all off this past weekend. So the men's team, of course, getting Much needed rest. What's on tap here? Omaha travels to Miami. Colorado College will travel to Kalamazoo and face Western Michigan. Duluth faces Denver in Denver. So Denver, a pair of home game matchups, a 4-game set, so to speak. And St. Cloud will travel to Grand Forks, Ralph Engelson Arena to face North Dakota. Before we get to that matchup, let's take a look at the standings. Denver has pulled away because of their weekend against North Dakota. They're at 41 points right now. Western Michigan, St. Cloud in second and third, respectively, at 33 points. Omaha right there, same point value with 33. So second through 4 in the NCHC all tied with everything to play for, with about 4 games remaining for each team. Minnesota Duluth has 23 points, as does Colorado College, vying for that 5th place spot there. We talked about CC. 6th or better was a good season for them. They have a chance to do it here, depending on St. Cloud's result this weekend, and of course, the way the Tigers play at Western Michigan. If you're a Huskies fan here, North Dakota's at 21. Miami is at 9. If you're a Huskies fan, obviously you'd like a St. Cloud sweep, you'd like a CC sweep, and you would like a Duluth sweep, all things considered, and a Miami sweep. Those would be what you would like as the bottom 4, all facing top 4 teams, actually. Kind of interesting the way that is all shaken out. There's a top 4 team facing a bottom 4 team in all of the matchups this weekend. So big week, coming up for NCHC action. 1, is there any matchup that intrigues you? And 2, how do the Huskies, after a week off, handle North Dakota?
Yeah, you talk about the schedule, a couple weeks ago that could be an absolute nightmare. Can't say that's any better, right? North Dakota got swept by Denver. Now, mind you, Denver is good, but North Dakota, they're not going to be happy, and they're going to be back on home ice. And for St. Cloud, you're going to have to be ready. You're going to really have to be ready. In fact, if anything, that start's going to be so important. We talked about it yesterday during the girls' high school hockey game. As the number 1 seed, it was Lakeville South actually gets the bye, and for Northfield they went and they played the previous week. So they had momentum. They were fresh, and you could just see Lakeville South just wasn't. Let's just say up to 100%. Right? They just looked a little bit, not lazy, but they just looked a little bit slow. But at the end of it, for St. Cloud, you have to avoid that. You have, shall we say, when was the last time that we could say North Dakota was like a fish that was drawing blood in the water? You have to be the shark, right? North Dakota's wounded, and you have to be able to, even after a bye week, have that killer mentality to come in, even if it's on the road, and really establish yourself. In St. Cloud, could we argue, Noah, that maybe they've been stewing on the Miami series a little bit too, so maybe there's some emotion there that they want to get out. So that to me is intriguing. And then for the rest of the NCHC, right? I think I want to see how CC and Western Michigan does. Honestly, that's kind of where I'm at, because CC had a decent showing last weekend, and see if they can keep, a bit of a better standings for them in the NCHC. It's kind of, 2 separate grids. Your top 4, your next 3, then Miami, of course, unfortunately for them. So I want to see if they can continue that momentum. Omaha's an intriguing squad that I want to see, because they've are in the top 4 right now, and they look like they've been a pretty consistent squad. So that's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the tournament history here for the NCHC Frozen Face-Off. I want to see if there's any sort of course, this is the timeline of the conference pieces here. I wanted to see if there has been any other season for the NCHC in which North Dakota has not made the NCHC Frozen Face-Off here, and I would imagine it would have come somewhere early on here, but it's kind of hard to read this. So, but very curious. I don't know if it's happened. Yeah, this could potentially be the first year that North Dakota would not be able to make the big dance. Should they get a matchup, they could. If the Huskies finish in second, they could get St. Cloud in the first round matchup as well. Could get Western, could get Omaha. I think Denver is a bit too far away. I think they're going to be the Penrose champions unless something crazy happens. They've kind of pulled too far away, I feel like, in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, a lot of intriguing matchups, obviously, this week in the NCHC. St. Cloud, like you mentioned, they've got to be ready. They've got to be ready to take a couple of crucial points here, this series especially, but of course the series against Duluth as well too. They've really got to be on their A game, playing their best hockey as they approach the playoff push here. So if you're looking, there is NCHC historical info on college hockey news. You can find the historical, but I don't have time to sift through all of them one by one here. So feel free to check that out if you would like. Pairwise action here, of course, NCHC teams. Miami is stuck at 44 right now, right below Northern Michigan. Huskies fans paying attention. Your pals, Wisconsin, down to 36, Nick. They've dropped a little bit, actually, as of recent. As far as other teams here, Minnesota Duluth is still behind North Dakota at 24. Technically 25, North Dakota at 22, Omaha at 17, which surprises me a little bit. I know their non-conference wasn't that great, but they're having a very good NCHC season. So they're right next to Notre Dame and UConn. Notre Dame occupying the 16 spot, Northeastern at 15, Michigan State, Mankato, Michigan Tech, Harvard round out your outside the top 10, so to speak. Cornell is at 10, Ohio State at 9, Western Michigan, an NCHC team at 8, right next to St. Cloud at 7, Penn State at 6, Denver is at 5. Denver has the second best win percentage ranking behind only Quinnipiac, who is at 2, Michigan at 3, BU at 4, and of course the Minnesota Golden Gophers, even with their blemish, still sit atop the pairwise. Any surprises here? Alaska's at 18, 19. Any surprises here? The highest Atlantic hockey team is RIT at 20. Is there anything that you've been seeing that you'd like to point out?
Not really.
Maine is at 27, despite their poor Hockey East record. So
yeah. If anything, just the rapid slip of Arizona State. If anything, down to 42. You can even throw Northern Michigan in there. Bemidji is also really fallen off the docket the second half of the season. I'm trying to see.
They're at 30. They're at 30. Other Minnesota schools, St. Thomas at 47.
Yeah. So not really that surprised. UConn now kind of on the outside bubble, looking in at 17. More of like, okay, they're actually closer than people think in terms of being in the top 16. Other than that. If we go back to the very beginning, because it's always the conversation around one team. It's Harvard, right? Yeah. Because we talk about scheduling and are they really that good? In fact, they'll be again playing for a Beanpot title. In fact, was it Harvard and Northeastern the first time in Beanpot's history of 70 plus years that those two teams meet in the final? How about that for a little caveat? That's kind of interesting. So. Yeah, I don't know. Nothing really surprising, but
I suppose when you only have 4 teams in a tournament, you're bound to see each other more than once, though, huh?
You would think, right?
With that being said, moving over here, Nick, WCHA women's things going on here, and intriguing as we approach the last week of the regular season here. The Huskies did not hurt themselves necessarily, but they've created a very good showdown as we enter the final week of the regular season. Let's get you caught up from what happened last week here. St. Thomas traveled to Ohio State. It was 6-1 and 5-0 for the Buckeyes. Bemidji State traveled to Mankato. Mankato winning 3-2 and 4-0. If you were a Huskies fan, you needed a Bemidji State win at some point in there. Wisconsin traveled to Minnesota. 3-2 shootout victory for the Badgers and 7-5 in night number 2. And St. Cloud, 2-1 shootout finish for Duluth, and then 2-0 victory for the Bulldogs in regulation. So the Huskies picking up some crucial points there. Any of those scores in the WCHA that caught your eye? I know that Wisconsin-Minnesota matchup was obviously a very big one.
Very big one. Not necessarily. I think it went just about as what we expected, at least from the scores wise. I don't really know. How about the barn burner with those two teams 7-5 in the second one? Holy cow! But I don't know. Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that Bemidji would maybe continue their recent streak of good success here. Apologies for those listening if it sounds like my voice is starting to fade. Done a lot of hockey and it was that darn TV interview that really got me, obviously. So Friday, 2-1 shootout victory for the Bulldogs, officially credited as a 1-1 tie as far as rankings are concerned. Scoring got started with Gabby Hughes on the power play for Duluth in the middle of the second period. And then the Huskies, with about 3.5 minutes to play, Emma Gentry from Addie Scribner to tie that hockey game. Maggie Flaherty was the only goal scorer in 3 rounds of shootout action. Gentry, Newland, Himlarova misses on the Huskies side. So St. Cloud was 28 for 68 for a 41.1% faceoff percentage. Not ideal. Shots 44-21 in favor of the Bulldogs. How about this, though? JoJo Chobak, 43 of 44 for a 977. That'll play. Emma Soderberg, 20 of 21 for a 952. So a good matchup on the other side. Huskies were 0 for 2 on the man advantage. Of course, Duluth scoring 1 goal on their 3 opportunities. On Saturday night, Duluth, a 2-0 finish here. Second goal was an empty netter. The first goal, essentially the game winner, on the power play, Ashton Bell at the 15:52 mark of the second period. Huskies were outshot 32-15, but were better in the faceoff dot, 51%, 23 for 45. Sonia Hola, 30 out of 31, a 9.68. Unfortunately, her counterpart, Emma Soderberg, stopped 15 of 15 and was perfect. So goaltending has not been the issue for the Huskies, as
No.
The trend continues from previous years here. The only thing that St. Cloud really still has struggled with this year compared to other years historically is suppressing shot volume against some of these teams here. They're giving up a lot of chances against here, but they're moving in the right direction, and they're going to need every bit of it. Huskies were 0 for 1 on the power play. Duluth, 1 for 4 on the power play. Not often you've seen this Huskies team get beat on the kill in back-to-back nights on the women's side here, and they were both the difference makers, so to speak, in some senses. But where does this put us here, Nick? Ohio State, of course, atop the pack. They are at 66 points. Minnesota at 62. Wisconsin is at 58. They round out the top 3. Minnesota, Duluth, not going to be touched. They're going to be in 4th place at 48 points regardless. So those are your home teams for the WCHA. Your 8th and 7th place spots are Bemidji State and St. Thomas, respectively. The only way that could change is if Bemidji wins them all and St. Thomas wins nothing coming up into the last weekend, which would be, Bemidji has Duluth, so they have a tough task. They have a tough task for them coming up here. But here is the matchup that everybody is looking for. Like we mentioned, Duluth traveling to Bemidji, Minnesota traveling to St. Thomas. Ohio State has Wisconsin Saturday, Sunday for a matchup of the big 3. St. Cloud, 30 points. Minnesota State, 30 points. Mankato travels to the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center this weekend for the final regular season action. And this will decide who gets Duluth and who gets Wisconsin, likely, unless something crazy changes, for that 5th and 6th place spot in the WCHA. Everything to play for here. Huskies have to take at least 4 out of, well, technically they just have to take 3 out of 6 points,
3,
I guess.
Yeah, I think.
Technically, because they have the tiebreaker right now, but I don't know if they would still hold it depending on what the results look like as far as wins. Both teams in the WCHA, 26 games played, 9-16-1 are the records. Both 0-2 in overtime wins and losses. So maybe you probably have to have 4 out of 6, actually, when it comes down to it, just because.
Just a tiebreaker.
Yep. As to what that would look like. What are your thoughts on last weekend? What are your thoughts on the last matchup of the regular season?
So you got to be happy, first of all, to beat Wisconsin in their own building. Holy cow, right? Or sorry, what Wisconsin? Oh my gosh, dude. My brain is scrambled. I'm still in last week. No, Minnesota Duluth. The shootout win. Yes. So, it's like you said, this team has prided itself on defensive structure. It's prided itself on, clogging the middle, being really a tough team to get through the blue paint. But unfortunately, they're a team right now, as you mentioned, that offensively they get peppered quite a bit. These goaltenders, Showback and Sonia Hola, and Brian Idalski is very, very complimentary of these ladies. Again, 2 number 1 starters on teams. He rotates them in and out. You kind of wonder where this team would be this season if they didn't have this tandem. You really do. Now, granted, there's been some progress, right? And Duluth has had quite the year, especially, was it probably November or December, they started to really sort of pick up steam?
Yeah, and was curious how that matchup was going to be. Of course, Emma Soderberg, that starting gig, JoJo Chobak, the former Minnesota Duluth Bulldogs. So,
and so then you drop it in a shootout, but you still get, a little bit on the in terms of, was it just a point there in the WCHA? Then you're unable to score then in the second game, 2-0. But overall, you hung with them, right? This Duluth team is no joke. So. I guess the only disappointing part is, you couldn't get enough offensive support. I mean, you hold the Bulldogs, which have had some good scoring prowess here, to 3 goals in the weekend. That's pretty good defensively. Just unfortunate that you were unable to, kind of help out that part of your game with some offensive support.
Two great goaltending performances. And you mentioned how good Duluth is as well too, but 2 back-to-back really great weekends, all things considered, for this Huskies club. Unfortunately, not a ton to show for it. I mean, 3 total points between Wisconsin and Duluth, but all of them are crucial, obviously, as we take a look at the standings here. And Mankato and St. Cloud, makes me feel a little bit better regardless of who you get between Wisconsin and Duluth. Makes me feel better about where you might be at in that first round matchup in the playoffs here. The question is, where would you be traveling here? What do you expect from Mankato here as we approach the final matchup of the regular season?
Both teams, right? What's the last weekend of the regular season. You got to lay it all out there, right? And for Mankato, you're trying to, you're trying to, get ahead. I mean, I'm not sure what's worse right now, Noah, right? Is if you're St. Cloud, you take on Duluth. And if you're Minnesota State, if they started where you would take Wisconsin, right? Pick your poison, right? It's not ideal for either way. But St. Cloud has beaten Wisconsin. I don't believe they have beaten Minnesota Duluth this year, if I recall. So if you're Mankato and if you're St. Cloud, I think you're just trying to keep some momentum going, right? Both these teams want these games, and it's going to be a pretty hard-fought battle. And because now it seems like these are just about set in terms of the way that the standings have kind of laid out, at least as far as the tiers and home ice and whatnot. So, you're just trying to put yourself in the best position so that way when we get past this upcoming weekend, you're feeling good about your game. You're feeling good about, your chances. And for St. Cloud, again, we talked about how we would measure success this season. I think regardless of what happens in the playoffs, I think we can call this quite the campaign for the Huskies. I think I want to throw that out there right away. Granted, it's not done yet, but if you can put an exclamation point on that and maybe pick up 2 crucial wins against Minnesota State and, rightfully cement yourself as the sole possessor of number 5, that'd be a nice way to end the regular season and should be feeling good going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and you think about kind of the idea that your playoff starts this weekend in some senses. The only way that some of these would change here, Minnesota would have to get swept by St. Thomas, and Wisconsin would have to sweep Ohio State for the Badgers to jump into second place. Minnesota, of course, would have to take at least 5 points out of 6 in their weekend against St. Thomas, and Wisconsin would basically have to sweep Ohio State or hold them to at least 1 point. As far as Minnesota Duluth, they will not catch anybody above them. They will not be caught by anybody below them. So they are safe, essentially, in that last home spot in 4th place. St. Cloud obviously could be caught by Mankato this weekend, and vice versa. And then on the other side of things, St. Thomas is sitting in 7th place. The only way that would change is if they are swept by Minnesota, which could happen, but Bemidji State would have to sweep Duluth this weekend for them to climb into that 7th spot and get either Minnesota, Ohio State, or Wisconsin in whatever capacity that is going to be. So still some intrigue in the WCHA, and I'm going to put it out here right now. Last time I checked, Mankato is traveling to the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center in St. Cloud, Minnesota. If you are a Huskies fan, especially knowing that the men are on the road this weekend, yes, get out there, be in that building for the final regular season matchup. This will be the final home game regardless for the Huskies women's team this season, and this is one of the best teams that we have seen historically in this program. And I don't know how you can hype up this matchup anymore. Both teams at 30 points. 5th place is on the line. Be there, be square. Seriously. I know that if I was a player, knowing that, I was playing for that tiebreaker, so to speak, heading into the playoffs, I would want a very good crowd on hand to help me, push through and have that home ice advantage against the Mankato team that has been playing well also as of recent. So obviously some great hockey coming out on the women's side. We'll probably dive into them a little bit deeper next week just because we'll have the playoff picture already and set. Minnesota Wild here as we move over to the last portion of the main show here. The Wild here.
Oh boy.
Yeah, not exactly the greatest week. They are actually sitting in the second wild card spot. They had a -7 goal differential this week here, which is what I would characterize as not exactly ideal. 52 games for them, same as the Colorado. Sorry, Colorado actually has 1 game in hand. Apologies. 28, 20, and 4 for 60 points. Both teams tied at 60. Colorado has, like we mentioned, 1 game in hand and essentially 1 less loss than the Wild have. Other things to note: 4, 6, and 1 in their last 10. They're right in the middle of a 7-game homestand. In the past week, they lose to Arizona, Dallas, Vegas, and then a shootout win last night against a very good New Jersey Devils squad. So that was good to see at least. But they are 3 points out of first in the wild card. So they are actually closer to being in third in the Central than they are in the wild card because of the success that Calgary and LA have had in front of them. What's on tap? They have Florida this Monday, tomorrow at home, Colorado at home on Wednesday. That's kind of an important one. And then they've got Dallas at home Friday, Nashville at home on Sunday. Yeah, I mean, I got to take in last week. I got to take in about half of the Arizona game, most of the Dallas game, and I wanted to say most of the Vegas game, but I'm going to be honest. After it was 5-1 after 2, I definitely shut the TV off, and I did not get to see the game yesterday, which they clawed back in. But yeah, those first 3 games of the week, self-implosion, shooting yourself in the foot, not ideal at all. And this is, I know we give a lot of people a lot of flack, but throw the Derek Felski in here for this week. I mean, sometimes some of the negativity is slightly warranted, I think, for this team, because they're doing exactly what Minnesota sports fandom didn't want them to do, is be mediocre enough to just make the playoffs, but not good enough to do any damage. I think that's the perfect characteristic of this team. We've talked about it all year, where we've tried to hope that they were going to ride the wave and finally find that momentum at the right time. They found momentum this week, Nick, but it was kind of in the wrong direction.
And it puts the job of Bill Guerin into a much tougher position, if you think about it, right? Because now with a second wild card spot, now you're really into just really analyzing who your team is, right? Because and here's what we know: this team is having almost no ability to score 5-on-5. That's a problem. It seems like there's certain guys in depth, like Sam Steele, just hasn't really been able to, shall we say, produce in that role they was between. I'm curious what Jordan Greenway's future looks like. I'm curious as to whether Eric Sinek, and if you do make a move in that grief line, right? Because that grief line has been sort of the catalyst. It's been the driver of the squad. If even one of those players gets traded, there goes the grief line.
Yep.
And so you kind of wonder, what does that signal? Then do you move Eric Sinek up to the top line just to try to spark something? I don't know, because I know that there's been a lot of people out there that have been sort of being critical of the line combinations, and unfortunately, when you're not scoring 5-on-5, I'm not sure what else you can do as a coach, but just to move things around and just give it a shot, right? Sometimes you get lucky, and then some things that you don't maybe think will work or whatnot, all of a sudden they're just fantastic, right? But more so, can we talk about the elephant in the room too?
Sure.
Marc-Andre Fleury has not been great.
Yeah,
he has not been great. And Philip Gustafsson continues, and can we plug us a bit? Proves us that we were correct the entire freaking time since before the season even started. I'm sorry, I have to put that out there, because we've been saying the whole time, this is a good goaltender. He's sounding right now. He's outplaying Marc-Andre Fleury, and you kind of wonder if they start to ride him down the stretch a little bit, just to try to get this team buoyed a little bit as they continue to struggle scoring. It's not a good spot. And trade deadline now 2 weeks away. Do you buy? Do you sell? Because now this puts the spotlight right over Matt Dumba, right? Because if you feel like you're going to be in at least a decent playoff position, or feel like that spot is somewhat secure. You feel like your team is rolling in the right direction. I think you can entertain keeping him. But now it's like, I need a score. So now do you actually throw him out there and do you make the trade now? Although when we saw those 2 games and he was a healthy scratch, that defensive core did not look good either. I'm curious to Noah, what you would do if you're GM Bill Guerin here. If the team is reeling, you have obvious holes where this team can't score yet, and you've got players that are upcoming UFAs. I mean, this is, you're talking about the worst spot to be for a GM come trade down. This might be one of the worst spots to be in.
Honestly, the only thing that plays in my mind is the SpongeBob episode with the magic conch. They pull the string and, what should we do now? And it says nothing. And I hate to break it to you, Wild fans, I think that's about where we're at. I mean, maybe you look at a guy like Jordan Greenway and maybe offloading it, but really, what's your return? Every team knows that he's been injury prone a little bit. Yes, when he's on and he's effective, the big rig is certainly a terrifying force down in the corners, but I don't know that you do much of anything if you're the Wild, honestly. I mean, I think you stick with what you have and you see how it ends up, and then you move on from there. I mean, just with your cap space, you are so hampered. You're essentially playing at, 2/3, 67, 70% of what everybody else has available to them in the National Hockey League. So I don't know that you really do anything. And I know that's a tough thing to say, but what move are you going to make with the available cap space that, one, is going to make you better for something of a pure rental, and 2, what's going to make you better as far as like prospects or pipeline or consistent NHLers down the road here? The package that you would have to give up to get a guy like, for example, like your Vladimir Tarasenko's, your Bo Horvat's, things to give up. It's just not going to happen. No. I don't think he does much of anything. Maybe he moves one guy here or there, but I don't know that there's not a big enough fix or a quick enough fix for this Wild team based on the trade parameters they have that's going to slot into the lineup and suddenly do things. Maybe a defenseman that's a good, reliable defenseman, and that's
hard to come by. Here's the move that I would make, Noah, and that is you do make a move, and we're going to talk about this team a little bit, but I think you do call up Sammy Walker.
Yeah.
I think he may, and it's a tough position, right? Because you don't want to put the pressure of a young kid who's tearing up the AHL, right? 40 points in, I believe, 41 games, 21 goals for the former Gopher. But I think you do that. And
I agree for sure.
There's been a lot of people asking, well, what about Marco Rossi? I actually say you keep Marco Rossi down.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is I think he's got 28 points in 29 games down in Iowa. We're going to do a deep dive, obviously, coming up here soon, so I won't spoil it too much. But just from a management standpoint, a personnel development management, I think if there's any person that right now could slot in and maybe provide a spark, it's Sammy Walker. And that may be your only move if you're Bill Guerin. And I'm a little shocked he hasn't called him back up. And maybe Noah, is it just to try to keep, the player, meaning Sammy Walker, from being put into a situation where he feels like he has to be the guy? Also, you're trying to, sort of manage the Mason Shaw type, so you would have to make an additional move to bring him up, I think.
Yeah. Mason Shaw has been the most productive at compared to when you look at like Jordan Greenway and others. He's actually been one of the more productive guys actually in this lineup relative to know, what he brings and how he drives possession. Brett Marshall actually did a really good job actually on Twitter a couple of days ago highlighting that as well too. So no, I definitely agree that Sammy Walker at some point will get a shot. The question is how close, because of course, as we'll dive into Iowa, their situation is precarious as far as their standings as well too. And I'm sure they want all the help that they can get. If you've got a guy who's a point per game player, it's, something you don't want to lose easily.
Exactly.
And that's the thing is you look at that, obviously the Wild want to make the playoffs and be successful as well too. And it pushes a little deeper in the AHL schedule, but if you're Bill Guerin and you look at this Wild as a second wild card team, do you really want to disrupt what's going on for Iowa? Like, I know that sounds, right. I know people think on the idea that, yes, it's the big club. They're the priority. Yes, you call guys up to make sure you're making the playoffs. That's where all the money is. I certainly agree. But at the same time, Sammy Walker, as great of a player as he is not going to be the knight in shining armor for this Wild team. He could play very well. I mean, I'm not saying he couldn't, but he has been the knight in shining armor for this Iowa Wild team.
Yes,
and it's, do you want to disrupt some of that and what they've got going on down there too, knowing that the Wild have been middling at best for the big club? I don't really know the answer here. I think what we're getting to here for sure, though, most of these moves, if not all of them, around the trade deadline, around the playoff push, are going to be internal, and that's where you're looking in. You talked about Marco Rossi as well too. Is he a centerman that you believe is going to make a big enough of an impact at the NHL level that he's warranted pushing somebody out of a roster spot and filling the center of the ice? I don't know. I kind of lean towards no, just based on what we've seen. But crazier things have obviously happened. Just don't give up a first rounder for Martin Hansel again, please.
I don't think, and that's the other thing too, right? Is, with a deep of a draft that you're coming up, you're not parting ways with draft picks. As again, you've got now two of the worst of the cap hits coming up for Zach Parise and Ryan Suter buyouts there again, the 14+ million. So you need those cheaper contracts. You do.
And you've got 30 games left. If the Wild go like 300 or 400 overall in winning percentage in those 30 games and miss the playoffs, it's not the worst thing in the world for this team. It's and if anything, here's to throw an even more big of a wrench in this whole thing, right? Knowing that is with the Bally Sports situation. Again, it's expected they will file bankruptcy on Monday, tomorrow, as we're recording this on Sunday. What does that do to NHL revenues, right? So does that impact the salary cap, right? So is that important?
A little bit, right? So it's interesting. So just I think we'll stop. We'll quit with this, and that is upcoming free agent. So Ryan Reeves, $1.75 million. That he's an unrestricted free agent. Freddie Gaudreau at 1.2. He's an interesting name to watch. Again, the $7 million cap hit starts next year for Matt Boldy with his extension. Sam Steele is an RFA. After some of the way he's been playing, you kind of wonder if he'll even get a qualifying offer. Brandon Duhaime as well as Mason Shaw. And then how about this? We all know about Matt Dumba, Kalen Addison, another restricted free agent, but I think a bigger one, Philip Gustafsson is a restricted free agent, and because of his service, he's got arbitration rights. So, yikes. So
great.
When you look at that picture, Noah, you almost get the sense that maybe regardless of it, are you forced to make a move? Like, are you like just to be like, hey, if this is one, if I'm going to get a return like for Matt Dumba, if I maybe even trade him for picks, it's better than nothing. It's an intriguing puzzle, and let's just say this. Thank goodness I'm not in Bill Guerin's shoes. That's not a puzzle.
Yeah. Have we seen Bill Guerin pull the trigger for the sake of pulling the trigger though? Like, that's just not him.
Right.
And he's a very calculated human, I think, and
he is.
He's in a tough spot, and I think whatever move he makes, it's going to be scrutinized. It's not going to be perfect if he makes any moves at all, which is also not making a move is a move, if you know what I mean. So we'll have to see. The Wild are certainly reeling for the most part in recent games here. Could they go on a tear? I mean, the thing that's nice is, yes, they're one game out of hand for Colorado, but Colorado's 8-2-1 in their last 11 or whatever it is, or 8-1-1 in their last 10. So it's taken that much of a push for the Avs, who are finally getting healthy, to get back within striking distance of the Wild. So, I mean, it hasn't been a terrible season. They're just very meh, like a lot of those teams. Like, obviously Dallas is a great team. All, teams that are atop the Pacific. Vegas is a good team. On the eastern side, the Boston Bruins lost in regulation last night for only the second time at home this season. They lost to Seattle earlier, and I forget who they lost to last night. But that's the thing, is you're just not in that upper echelon right now, unfortunately. And the Wild are just kind of in a tough spot, but we're here. We're going to cover it, and we're going to see what's going on. They do have, according to many, though, one of the best prospect pipelines in the National Hockey League, and that, of course, starts with Tim Army down in the Iowa Wild. So we will head on to our extra ice session, where we will deep dive the AHL club. And welcome into the Extra Ice Session, the Huskies Warming House podcast, episode 149. Myself, Noah Grant, joined by Nick Maxon at Nick Maxon PXP on Twitter. Myself at STSU Hockey 91. Find us at Warming House Den on the same platform, as long as Elon Musk doesn't blow it up. Speaking of not blowing things up, the Iowa Wild are currently sitting fifth in the Central Division in the AHL here, with I believe it's 25 games left to play. Their next game will be Wednesday and then Friday on the road in Manitoba. So you take a look at this team, like we mentioned, precariously in fifth, technically tied for fourth with the team they're about to play in Manitoba. Of course, Manitoba 3 games in hand, and then Rockford 1 point ahead at 54 points compared to 53 for the previous 2 clubs. Grand Rapids and Chicago in 6th and 7th, they're out of the mix. And then Milwaukee at 59 points and Texas at 61, kind of a little bit higher up as far as that push is concerned here. But the Iowa Wild here, Nick, first of all, exciting to be finally talking about this group here and talking about some of the great players that are obviously a part of this Iowa club here. They were in 3rd in the Central last week when we were getting ready to preview them. Of course, they'd slipped in relative terms, I guess. I guess the most nerve-wracking thing here is the Wild have their own fate to play for here with a game there, a team 3 games in hand against the Manitoba Moose. So 2 games set for them, have a really good chance to buy themselves some space, so to speak here. But number one question, have you ever been to an Iowa Wild game being so close to Iowa? And of course, I've always wanted to go. And, one of the things that I will say for whoever's listening, their website and their promotional package and their layout of, those sorts of things to make fan interest into the Iowa Wild effective. Whoever does their social media and their platform for the website does a fantastic job, by the way. It's fun to actually sift through their website and take a look at some of the great things they've got going on. And if I was down in the area, I would be definitely going to one of those games. And then, of course, the ECHL, the Iowa Heartlanders as well, too. But certainly a great building there. I mean, maybe we'll have to take a trip one day, Nick. What do you think?
Maybe.
You're a little bit closer than I am, though. So
a little bit.
But Iowa Wild here. I'm going to kind of let you take the lead a little bit here. Where do you want to start? What would you like to talk about first as far as this team? Would you like to talk about records? Would you like to talk about players? Where do we want to start here?
Let's start with the players.
Okay. Well, no secret. We just talked about it. Sammy Walker paces the team, 40 points in 40 games played, 21 goals, 19 assists, like you had mentioned previously. Certainly having a decent season by all things considered. Joe Hickett's next on the docket actually as a defenseman, 34 points in 47 games for him. Nick Patan, no surprise that he's 3rd on that list. Marco Rossi is 5th, 28 points in 29 games, has been productive, almost a point per game player, 3 power play goals and +5 in his time down there. So is there any player obviously that you like to highlight, but is there anybody here that stands out that maybe doesn't get a whole lot of love as far as Iowa Wild hockey is concerned?
I think he gets it in Iowa, but and I know that Wild fans were crazy about him. How about Adam Beckman?
Yeah.
17 goals, which I believe is 2nd on the team, 26 points, but his big knock is his consistency, right? He's a guy that drives possession. He's a guy that likes to shoot the puck. And he showed that again with his call up just a little bit ago with the Wild, right? He had a couple of game stints, but defensively still has some learning to do on the defensive side of the game. But, as far as carrying offense, he's been the goal scorer, behind Sammy Walker. And then how about journeyman Andre Schuster? As far as being a big physical presence, again, he's 6'7". He's a monster. And not only has he got 12 points, he's a +12 on the season. So he's actually in a really good position as far as, being on the right side of the puck too. So that to me is kind of where I go with that. Anybody else that you want to highlight? Oh, how about this? Here's a fun fact. Former Husky Sam Henches, goaltender Jesper Wallstedt has the same amount of goals as him. 1.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Actually,
well, to be fair, Henches has been out most of the year with an injury, I believe, a lower body. So I like to give him crap. But yeah, Wallstedt, how about that?
To be fair, Mason Shaw only has 1 goal in 2 games as well, too. So
yeah, right. So, but I think the future of the Wild. We're talking both Iowa, the big club. You talk about Jesper Wallstedt. Holy cow! Was the team's all-star. You kind of wonder what. I would say probably he's got another year down the AHL. You ride out the Marc-Andre Fleury contract. What do you think, Noah? Or with the money situation, Philip Gustafsson, are they able to retain him?
Yeah, kind of an interesting piece. Obviously, he's really the goaltender of the future. I mean, his success has certainly been impressive. Obviously, the other guy that I wanted to highlight before we get back to the goaltending situation, because I imagine it's going to take us a while to sort through that. How about Joe Hicketts?
Yeah.
Just and not just because of his point production. Yes, it steps off the page, but he's the same birth year as I am, a 96. So he's 26, almost 27 years old here, if he hasn't had his birthday already. But, 4 goals, 30 assists here. You look at a guy like that. I mean, there's somebody that, does Bill Guerin look at a guy like that and say, oh, if we lose Matt Dumba for nothing and we can't fill anything externally, and Alex Galagossi continues to struggle, does he get a call up? Does he get a look at the big club here? I mean,
They gave who am I thinking? They gave John Lazat a call. So
yeah,
uh,
I'm going to guess Joe Higgins is maybe a little bit more fleet of foot than he is.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Even with maybe one cement skate. But, with that being said, Kalen Addison obviously spent a lot of time here as well, too, to be productive at the AHL level. Tim Army, one of his great assets is getting a team ready and getting players ready to play at the next level. So, I kind of wonder if maybe he gets a look, or maybe, come training camp next year, maybe he's somebody that kind of flies under the radar and then suddenly has a good camp and maybe gets a bigger look than maybe we anticipate, depending on the offseason moves for the Wild. But yes, you talked about goaltending here. In fact, let me pull up the goaltender tab just so I make sure that I'm saying the appropriate things. Zane McIntyre, of course, has been the more appropriate call up as far as, some of the pieces for the Wild as far as emergency situations. They're waiting for Jesper Wallstedt to feel like he is the guy. One of the things that is interesting reading articles in The Athletic about him is that he's somebody who's he just loves to be at the rink. He loves the game. You saw him jamming, listening to the music in that game a couple of weeks ago too. Yeah. He's someone that, he's young, only 20, 21 years old, but he, brings a lot of flair into the goaltending position. And, that's something that I think is encouraging to see, because anytime you look at a goaltender, yes, you want them to be dialed in, but you also want to make sure that the moment doesn't seem too big for them. In a 274 goals against, coming in with a 909 save percentage, which is not exceptional by any means, but Iowa has not been the strongest team, so to speak, this season. So I don't really know what you'd do with him. In my mind, unless he has a great camp, I think maybe one more year, or maybe at least the start of a year. But the goaltending situation, if Fleury, for whatever reason, is really struggling, if Gustafsson is on his way out, we could see him sooner rather than later. I know Capo Kakinen is having a decent little stint-ish in San Jose, but you look at that situation, a guy that, kind of caught lightning in a bottle early, and then the Wild maybe rushed him a little bit too early into some of that responsibility. You don't want to do that with Jesper Wallstedt, because I know if you're a Detroit Red Wings fan, for example, you picked a goaltender before him and you feel like that you're missing out right now, and the Wild have to make sure they play their cards right with him. What do you think about the goaltending situation down in Iowa?
It's good, right? Again, the team in front of them, has been, shall we say, suspect sometimes defensively when you look at their stats. And in fact, on the season, the Wild are they're at -4, so they're not terrible. But at the end of it, for a goaltending position, you and I both know this, and for those who've done the systems checks, goaltending numbers can be either inflated, or they can also be, shall we say, a cover. Right, for the team, right? Their goaltend, their team stats, and for a team like Iowa that, yes, Sammy Walker, and they have a couple, but really the depth isn't crazy there for goal scoring.
Yeah,
after a couple of people,
and you look at sorry to jump in, but you look at the Jesper Wallstedt splits, in his game logs. Of course, allowed 5 early in the season and 6 goals early in the season in his first 5 games. Other than that, he allowed 5 goals against Rockford in the middle of December. And since then, he's been stellar, except for the previous game against Chicago where he allowed 6. I mean, how about this log since between that time where they played Rockford on December 13th, and then they played on February 11th last night, and he allowed 5 and 6 in those games respectively. Here's his goals allowed and his splits, Nick. 2-3, 1-1-1, 0-2-1-2, 3-3. That's pretty good to give your team a chance most nights. His season high, he's had a couple games with 37 saves, one with 36, and then of course a game against Rockford where he had 42 games ago back in February. But of course the Wild were, or at least he was off for about a week from his previous start until the last one, and Wild lost 6-5 in extra session here. It actually was a hat trick. I forget who had the hat trick the other night, but yeah, he certainly has proved himself to be a capable goaltender, and part of those splits, that 909 is certainly going to be affected when you allow 6, unfortunately. So, but he is a guy that.
And that was early on, right? It is an adjustment from the European to the American game against smaller ice sheet. The game is played a little bit different. So I think that was more, growing pains than anything. Because when you look at the way he plays, he's just so calm. He's so poised. His rebound control is so good, right? He doesn't overcommit. He tracks pucks well, right? Just his fundamentals are so sound. And then you put together with, again, just the way he mentally prepares for the games. He just never seems to get flustered. I know he likes to take ownership. I know that, was it 2 years ago in the World Juniors that he kind of made some noise of, I let my team down, even though he gave up only like 3 goals. He's a competitor. Yeah. He's a competitor. And that's kind of where that Fleury-esque comes into play, where they expect, to stop every puck, and, granted, in, the leagues, that's just not possible. Right. But that's what they bring to the table, is that they're, almost ultra competitive against themselves, whereas they expect the world. And when they don't meet their own expectations, they really are able to take ownership of that. So they really do have, not only a special talent in Wallstedt in terms of just how he plays, but he's the ultimate competitor in that way. He's going to be the one that looks in the mirror and says, okay, what went wrong here? I need to be better. He's not out there pointing fingers. So, like you said, he's going to be the goaltender of the future. Question's going to be with the bigger puzzle. And I think you're right. I think you have to leave him if you want for him to develop his full potential. I think you have to give him next year too down in Iowa. I just think you have to.
I agree. Yep.
You have another year of Marc-Andre Fleury. I would think with Gustafsson's play that has done both good for Minnesota and bad, because again, a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, he's going to have a lot of leverage at the bargaining table. And you kind of wonder what that picture will look like, or maybe what the priority is going into the offseason here with Bill Guerin. So interesting picture, but I think, again, if you want him to reach that, first round potential, that again, in this day and age, you just don't do that for a goaltender unless he's good. You got to make sure he gets his time to develop and adjust and go from there, and not rush him like you mentioned.
Yeah, I wonder if the team is getting skated hard a little bit. Like I mentioned, 6-goal loss. It was actually in regulation, apologies. 6-5 was the loss. Sam Henches actually had an assist on one of Marco Rossi's goals yesterday. Actually, Iowa, 3 goals in the span of 2 minutes and 9 seconds, carrying a 4-1 lead into the first intermission, losing that game 6-5 ultimately. Adam Beckman with the hat trick in the loss. So kind of a tough one here. The Wolves clawed back from 4-1 down to lead 6-4 at one point before Iowa came back within 1. So like we mentioned, they've got some time off until they play on Wednesday, but you kind of hope they can rebound from that. But yeah, the goaltending situation is an interesting one. And I know we talked about, Wallstedt spending another season there. I don't think that's the wrong move. I think with goaltenders, you want to make sure that you're really sure. Guys like Marco Rossi in a similar boat, I think, in terms of making sure that he's ready, just because of his size a little bit, and just his game seems to be a little bit more mental in terms of what he brings to the table. He's been productive down in the AHL. Before we get to Sammy Walker here, Nick, Marco Rossi, 1, is he up for the playoff push at any point? And number 2, regardless of what happens at the end of the season, unless he comes up to the big club and ends up tearing it up, okay, like he did in the preseason, what is the game plan for Bill Guerin and co. as they move forward with him?
My honest answer is no. I don't think he comes up at all, honestly. Yeah. He talked about that also on Straight to the Source just this last week. First of all, when you brought him up, I shouldn't say brought him up, but when he made the opening night roster, right, there was expectations. It looked like he was maybe ready. And then when he got into actual competition against an adversary, right, it didn't look good, right? There were just things where you felt like, okay, he's just not owning the puck right now.
Yeah, just not confident, like guys that when you have the puck, you got to feel like whatever you're going to do with it, you're going to come in and make a play. Like you're crossing the blue line, you're making this play. And it just felt like it was almost like he was thinking too much about what could happen. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So, when you send him back down, was it the right move? Yeah, of course. I don't think anybody is, going to argue that. But now the question is, just like we've mentioned with the big club, right? Does it make sense not only for the big club, but does it make sense for the player right now? And I still think that Rossi is better suited just to stay there, because you don't want to bring up a player, send him back down, excuse me, in the sense that, like you said, he's not going to be the savior coming in from the American Hockey League. And more importantly, if he's playing confident, you want him to ride that confidence throughout the rest of the season down there. And reevaluate, I think, in the offseason. I just don't know that it would be the best for him to call him up right now. And it's not about, and the argument from some fans is, well, just like kind of Walker, right? Like, oh, they've earned these call-ups. Well, how does, what do you say earned, right? Or if you're looking at just the stat sheet, okay, we can make an argument about production, but we can also have the argument that is the production and what we saw in the American Hockey League is not going to translate directly into the NHL, right? It's only half the puzzle. That is, what is Marco? And again, a lot of what got him back to the AHL it wasn't that he was not finding the score sheet. Yeah, that was a concern, but it was more like, hey, I'm just not being like a bully. It says, hey, this puck is mine off my stick and I'm going to battle for it. It was his battle intensity sometimes. Again, like you mentioned, maybe overthinking the play sometimes. It's those mental type things that were the bigger reasons he was sent back down. And I just don't know where that is. I don't think any of us know. We know that the Minnesota Wild know that. And just based on development models and just based on if it's a mental thing, I think you just leave him where he's at, where he's successful, and continue to build on that success and not bring him up into a spot where, the game is faster. There is not as much room out there. Players are smarter. They can read plays, right? You don't want him to be in that experience right now. And can we play the devil's advocate to that, right? Knowing that is, if you're the big club and you already have seen that behavior of the big club before, do you really want to put him in that spot?
Yeah.
And also for the team in that spot, knowing that you're at a critical juncture, you're in the second wild card spot. You technically could be out of a spot right now if tiebreakers were one way or the other. It's just not a good fit right now.
And that's where you want utilitarian players. Your Adam Beckmans, your Nick Patans, and of course your Sammy Walkers. Of course, Rossi, 2 years left after the season on his deal. Sammy Walker entering the last year of his deal next season. We've talked about it. Sammy Walker, his ability to, kind of finesse pucks out of corners. Not the biggest guy, not the most physical guy, but he very deft with his stick, not deaf with his stick. Although I don't know, could be, I guess.
Right.
But his ability to use his hands and be able to use his footwork to create opportunities. We saw that at the big level. I agree with you. I certainly think he gets another look if the Wild are in a position to, bring him up and feel that it's warranted with a playoff push. If they feel that they're still in the hunt. I like what he brings to the table. It's interesting. We talked about, even last year, you and I both thought he might never get a shot at the NHL level just because of his size, and the year that he kind of finished with at the University of Minnesota has certainly developed very well. Credit Tim Army again and that staff down there. But one of the things that I don't think either of us anticipated that might bring Sammy Walker to an NHL level player at some point, he thinks the game so well.
He does.
And really, the higher the level, the higher the intensity, the more he seems to slow his brain down and process information accordingly. There's some players that just, when the spotlight gets bigger, they find a way to just slow everything down and the moment isn't too big. You wish you could take that tendency from Sammy Walker and give it to Marco Rossi right now.
Yep.
Just because of the fact that Marco Rossi has, to be fair, the more raw and better skill set between the two of them, but mentally right now Sammy Walker is just playing like someone who processes the game so much better here. And you wonder if maybe they could bounce things off each other. Of course, Sammy Walker is 23, Marco Rossi is 21. They're similar age. You look at this forward core besides Stephen Fogarty, who's having a great year. He's 29. Nick Patan is 27. Brandon Baddock, who of course would not want to meet in a dark alley if he's mad.
No.
He's 27 as well too. They've got two guys who are 25 and everybody else is 23 or under. The youngest is Liam Ogren, who of course is 19. Of course, he's not with the team, but as far as non-rostered players. And then on the defensive side, Dakota Murmas is 29. Andre Suster, of course, the NHL journeyman, is 32. Other than that, Joe Hicketts is 26, and everybody else is 23 or 20. And then in net, of course, besides Zane McIntyre at 30, both the other goaltenders, Hunter Jones and Wallstedt, are at 22 and 20, respectively, for age. So this is a young group with a lot of potential here. One, I want to hear if you have any additional thoughts on Sammy Walker, but also, a lot of people call this prospect pool a top three, if not the top prospect pool in the National Hockey League. Mm-hmm. One, do you agree? Two, if you don't agree, or even if you do you think it's overblown? And three, there's been comparisons to the 2012 prospect pool, which I don't think is as deep as this one is.
Not even close.
But, are we wrong to be excited? Are any of these guys going to pan out? Is this just overblown and you can't predict it? So why are we celebrating something that's not going to be? How would you kind of relay that?
Oh, I love this. I actually really do like this conversation because, first of all, yes, I agree that this is a very good prospect pool, but keyword prospect, right? There's one thing that in sports that often gets sort of, I say, wrongfully, linked is prospects equal proven commodities. They're not. So what you can do, though, is a prospect pool, and this is why we talk about prospect pools, right, is the chances, and let's just say it's 30%. Let's just say that if you take any prospect pool that's out there and say out of these players, probably only 30% are going to sniff the show, and maybe of that 10% will be a full-time NHL player. That's not far from reality. That's the thing, right?
That might actually be even a little high in some cases.
Actually. Yeah. So what does that mean? Why does that correlate to what I'm talking about? And that is prospect pools. If you can stock your cupboards with high enough raw talent, with people have got, shall we say, the better chances of making that sniff, then you can strike like lightning in a bottle, right? It's then you're using that, draft and development model well, but at the end of the day, nothing's guaranteed. And that's the flip side of the coin, right, Noah? And that is you can have these top prospects like Rossi, just to throw them out there. I'm not, going to use them in the next part of the example here, but and they come in with raw skill. They play great at junior hockey. They're actually doing really well in the American Hockey League, right? But again, it's about that final step. And when you ask, well, is this overblown? It's not that it's overblown, but I think it's misunderstood. And that is, every player has their own unique development path. And it doesn't mean that if you're in the Iowa Wild and you're a top draft pick that you make it, right? Ask the Edmonton Oilers how they feel about Nail Yakupov, right?
Yeah.
So because what does that mean? Does that mean the scouts got it wrong? Does that mean they just were fixated on it, right?
I think it's something that goes back to something that is almost way more simplified and goes back to the pond hockey days. I know that might seem abstract here, but
very much so, but it's okay.
Are we shocked at this point?
No, not at all.
I mean, our next episode is 150, so get with the program here. But speaking of programs, what does every really good hockey player from a small town in the middle of nowhere, what happens when they're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old? Do they stay playing with their piddly, podunkly little high school team?
No, they don't.
They go to a prospect team. They go play with better players. And this is where your prospect pool becomes effective. It's not about, they've got a lot of high-end prospects. They're number one. It's about they're adding better and better players to the talent pool to make every practice, every game competitive, and to push them into that area where they're going to push each other. And if you want to be a better hockey player, you have to play with better hockey players. That's why you see guys like, Ryan O'Rourke and stuff like that, these Stephen Fogartys, these guys who are a little bit older that, yes, they love to play the game, but you see them there because they've played NHL hockey. They've played some extensive stretches in the show. Then they come back down to the littler club Then they've got all of these young guys who are competing against each other. They're all world-class athletes, and then they're competing against guys who have played at the next level. It's only going to make you better. And if you are made better as a collective, because each of you has high-end skill, and like you said, Marco Rossi, great centerman, good playmaker, fleet of foot. Oh, but who's this Sammy Walker kid that came out of nowhere, and he's using his hockey IQ? He's using the finesse with his stick. He's using his hands to create opportunities. Now Marco Rossi goes, oh, I've got to adjust. I've got to start doing those things. On the other side, Sammy Walker goes, Marco Rossi, we know he's the guy. He's the prospect. He's a first-round pick. What can I do to make myself better than him? And that give and take goes back and forth. That's what makes a prospect pool exciting, is because whatever you want to rank it, that ranking to me means you've got more players available to make each other better in your prospect pool, and then complement some of those veteran guys. Joe Hicketts, who's 26, who I don't know if you call him a veteran, but he's been there a while.
Yep.
Guys like that, Steven Fogarty, Andre Schuster, those veteran guys are not only going to make those guys better, but they're also going to impart wisdom to continue to help those guys grow and develop. To me, I always think that we look at sports, especially in Minnesota, with this negative light, hoping to be surprised with something positive. I think when you talk about prospect pools, you've got to be positive about the outcome until that window is, or that viewpoint is no longer available, because we're just not at that point. There is nothing that has been shown to me with this prospect pool, even blips, struggles like Marco Rossi has had. They're so young. There's nothing that I've seen yet from this team that says, oh, we're trending in the wrong direction. There's still a lot of hope and a lot of promise. And as we've known, Tim Army and his staff down in Iowa usually do a fantastic job of getting these guys ready to play and ready to play at the next level. So that's what excites me about the prospect pool the most. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that and the Iowa Wild in general?
And again, all of that, you talk about players prepping each other, but again, we cannot understate how good of a job Tim Army has done.
Yes.
And one of the big things that he did was, and this kind of goes back to the Paul Fedden experiment, and that's probably the proper way to title his.
Well,
his
at least we got a lizard out of the deal,
right? And that is, for the longest time, the big club and the little club were not in sync. They weren't teaching the same systems. They weren't really trying to prep these guys to be a call up, right? So you have to complement also the executive staff and the coaching staff. We know that Tim Army works really, really closely with Dean Evison, right? And the player development coaches. So that's Brad Bombardier, Cody McLeod, just to name a couple, right? Where they're constantly, trying to adjust little things, right? And that's when you can have an opportunity like a Sammy Walker, where he can get a call up and he can fit right in and he knows what he's doing, right? How many times did we see, rewind the clocks back 10 years. How many times did we see a call up from Houston or Iowa at the one point, right? And they just looked like they were just out of place, right?
Where like Bambi on skates almost. And
it had nothing. And it's funny because to the casual fan, it looked like the player themselves was like, well, what? This guy sucks. Like, what's he had no idea what he's doing. When the reality is he probably was just fine, but because they were doing different systems and didn't understand what the big club wanted, and they weren't replicating that in the minor league system, he was kind of put out there, hung out to dry, right? So it is a development process that is linear in the sense that you have to have everybody on the same page, right? Because then as you work harder, as you grow, and as you mentioned, as players battle each other, they adjust. And again, experience, right? Yeah. That's the biggest thing about the development process is experience, right? Whether it's Joe Hicketts or whoever else that spent time in the NHL.
Yeah, Cody McLeod, a great example of a journeyman NHL AHLer who's now on staff.
Yes, a thorn in the wild side during some playoff runs, but
yes,
it's kind of funny how those types of players actually see the game almost better, right? They just have a really good grasp of the whole picture, and they bring that level of, okay, well, maybe that toe drag that I used to work with in high school or even that's not going to work here. Everybody knows that's coming. It's small things like that, when we talk about stick handling in the phone booth, you mentioned Samuel Walker and the stick skills, right? There's a lot that goes into just going into a corner with the right angle, with the right, way to with your stick and try to dig out a loose puck or to maybe take the puck away from someone. There's a lot of little nuances that go into that skill. It's kind of funny how we talk that up, and yet there's so many small details that go into that, right?
Yeah.
In the NHL, you're better at protecting the puck. You're better at seeing the puck. Ask Pavel Datsyuk, holy cow, right? So to wrap it up, right, and I think one thing we can't say about the Iowa Wild Club is there's a lot of intriguing talent there. Jesper Wallstad, Marco Rossi, Adam Beckman, I still put in there. Of course, Samuel Walker, we've talked him up and down. But there's also some players and juniors too, right, that will either make their jump either next year or the year after that will go to Iowa. Guys, the same thing, right?
Guys overseas, Liam Ogren, great example, good international player.
Yep. And then Spacek will be coming in a couple of years as a good defensive prospect. So, and then we're forgetting Brock Faber too, right? From the University of Minnesota, right?
Who?
Yeah, right. So at the end of it, you have to be excited, but it's got to be a controlled excitement, right? Because at the end of the day, you never know. You could be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. You get to the NHL, and regardless if you jump in right away as an 18-year-old, or maybe you spend some time in the minors, or you get sent down to even your junior like Shane Wright did, right? Which was, we've talked about that before. Very weird how they handle that. Thank you, Coachella Valley. But at the end of the day, when they get there, it's never guaranteed. Or shall we say, even if they get there, right? So it's nice to have the talent pool. It's nice to have it there. What it shows is that the scouts are doing their job. It shows that the GM, that everybody's in sync, and they're giving this team the best chance to draft and develop the players that they feel like they need for their roster, and doing things the right way, right? And I think that's really all it comes down to.
I like that phrase that you said, be excited. It's controlled excitement, but be excited. And I think that's the point we're trying to get across here. Speaking of things to look forward to, my final question here for you, Nick.
Oh boy.
16-3 versus 16-3, 5:30 p.m. today on Sunday, February 12th. The Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles. What are our predictions? Who's winning this game?
Super
What's
Bowl.
the score? What's the score?
Ooh, this is an interesting matchup. Duh, it's a Super Bowl, but
nice. And that's our show.
And that's it. But you have two very potent offenses, two very good stingy defenses. But the big thing is, how healthy is Mahomes and his ankle?
Yeah.
Right. Looks like he battled it out at the AFC Championship game. You kind of wonder with a sprained ankle. I've had a sprained ankle. Those can linger a bit,
especially those high sprains. They don't heal,
and they
great.
Hurt like a mother trucker.
Yes,
they do. So I think this is the Vikings fandom. It's just, I don't care who was their opponent, just not the Eagles. is my personal route. I don't really care, honestly. I just want a good game, and I think this is actually going to be a very, very good game. I think it's going to be a 24-21 win for the Kansas City Chiefs. I do think it's going to be back and forth. I think you're going to see a lot of Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I think you're going to see tight ends involved. We'll see what happens with Jalen Hurts. Is he able to use his feet a little bit here in the Super Bowl? Does the Kansas City defense have a plan for that? Because you also got to look at the other way for Mahomes, right? He can step up, but now with his ankle hampered, is he going to be throwing the ball more? Is he going to be in the pocket more? There's some intriguing storylines here. What about you, Noah? I'm curious to you.
Like you mentioned, Kelce is the key to the kingdom for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? And I think if you're the Philadelphia Eagles and you can shut down that slot receiver essentially and shut down that tight end position, I think they're going to be just fine. We are almost identical in scores. We just have a different team winning it. I have the Philadelphia Eagles 24-20 is my score that I am predicting. So I think the Eagles get it done because, like you mentioned, I think with Mahomes maybe not being the most mobile, I imagine he'll maybe feel a little bit better than he did previously with the extra week of rest. But I think if you're able to shut down the slot receivers, like you mentioned, one of the things that Kansas City does so well under Andy Reid, of course, is they have so many options, when it comes to the offensive side of things. They're good at short passing, good at throwing a long ball every now and then. Mahomes, when he's mobile, is able to scramble and create some yardage himself. And, of course, they've got a great running game on top of that. I do think the Eagles defense has enough to shut them down, but they have to make sure they're paying attention to the right weapons on the other side here. But like you mentioned, I do not anticipate a widespread for either team in this game. This should be one of the better Super Bowls I'm anticipating. But of course, why not be divisive? Nick has the Kansas City Chiefs. I have the Eagles taking the victory here. Anything else you wanted to add?
Do we put a friendly wager on it?
What do you have in mind?
I didn't think about that question.
I'm not going shirtless for anything.
Well, that wasn't on my bingo card anyways. Thank God.
Well, there's always a free space.
There is a free space. That's right.
That might be
let's see what can we do here?
How about this? The loser of this wager has to go out and do a 1-minute PSA that the Huskies Warming House podcast will put on Twitter, talking about how great North Dakota hockey fans are.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yep. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That will actually be pretty hilarious. So,
and we'll throw it in the show next week too. So, I like that.
You have to do some clip gathering also on the internet, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of those for your disposal.
Yeah. Honestly, now I kind of wish I would have just taken my shirt off. Anyway, with that being said, that will do it for the Huskies Warming House podcast. Our next episode will be episode 150, where we'll recap the Super Bowl. Of course, everything else related to the playoff push here. Most of the regular seasons are coming to an end. Playoffs are starting in the hockey world as well. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.